Welcome back. We're looking forward, B'ezras Hashem, to continue on page 250. On the top of the page, which is Perik Yud Zayin, or Igeres HaKodesh Yud Zayin, the 17th Holy Epistle of the Alter Rebbe, in this segment of Igeres HaKodesh. We are holding pretty much on the first third of the page, where it says Memale Kol Almin. We'll start perhaps via Kumu, by the great tzaddikim, which will resurrect in the time of, they'll arise in the time of resurrection, Lahanis Miziv HaShechina, to derive pleasure from the ray of the divine presence, because the Ha'ara and the revelation of Gan Eden is from the level of Memale Kol Almin, as opposed to when, by the time of Tchias HaMeisim, there will be a total different level of revelation, which is Seviv Kol Almin. Now, we explained this last week, and the week before, for that matter. We really should go on. If you're a newcomer today, it just makes sense that we invest all the time, or at least most of the time, in today's present information, because it's truly a click away on the wherever you're watching, but on the original website, Tanya Online, one word, tanyaonline.com, and all the classes are lined up on the left side, and it's from top to bottom. It's truly easy to access all the previous classes, for that matter. This is the fourth segment of Sefer Tanya Kadisha. We mentioned many times there are 5 segments in this holy Sefer. With precision, this is known to be the Teish Biksav of Teiras Chassidus. We merited to conclude all first 3, and we're presently learning Igeres HaKodesh. And as I mentioned, all the previous classes are set up on the left side, but again, it goes top to bottom, so you can see the previous the classes on this very Igeres. Now, we just do mention again for the newcomers, Igeres HaKodesh is a distinct segment, very different than the previous, very distinct than the previous segments of Likutei Amarim and Shaykh Igeres HaTshuva. We have a full presentation on the Igeres HaKodesh, the backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh, additional to explaining its style, the way it was set up. But there is a backdrop, an historical backdrop regarding this segment. We have it in the beginning of 10 of this very Igeres HaKodesh, about 5 or 6 or 6 or 7 back on the Igeres HaKodesh, also a click away. So regarding these last 2 classes, the Alter Rebbe points out of why Tchias HaMeisim, the revelation and the presence of the divine, which will be manifest, and precisely in this world, for that matter, not in any other place, in this very world, which is the reason why the great neshamas will come down to this very world to have a no, to derive pleasure and connect to this total transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, known as Seviv Kol Almin. How much greater is Seviv Kol Almin than Memale Kol Almin? When you say how much greater, you missed the point. Seviv Kol Almin, it's not measured how much greater it is than Memale Kol Almin. Like we mentioned 2 weeks ago, in the example, if infinity is a little excited, even a bit, over from of a trillion, as an example, over 100, or even over 1, it says, well, 1 is just 1, but a trillion, that's my space. That's somewhere I'm comfortable with. So when infinity is a bit more excited of a trillion than a number less than that, or particularly when you're talking about the far extreme of 1, it's not infinite. True infinity, a trillion, even more than that, 100, 1,000, and 1 is exactly the same. The moment it appreciates a higher number than a lower number, so it's not infinite. Infinity is a total different idea. The Seviv Kol Almin in comparison to Memale Kol Almin, a total different idea. Even Memale Kol Almin itself, as we learned last week, again, we should not need to repeat again, because it's really it's truly a click away. Even the Memale Kol Almin is an enormous revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. the tzaddikim, which in Yeshu and Neni Miziv Ashchir and the Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu Abraham Mitzvah Yaakov Rabbi Kiva Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai are in Gan Eden Meil Chayil El Choyel from one level to another. Ein Lehem Menucha, they have no rest because they are climbing yet deeper and deeper into this, the enormity of the manifestation of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of Zalter Rebbe has a whole presentation, Shir Hashirim. You learn it a bit, you realize that this Mamali Kalam, this part of Mamali Kalam which is revealed in Gan Eden, and particularly in Gan Eden Ha'elyain, is something which we can't begin to understand. We can't begin to understand what Gan Eden HaTachton looks like. Of course not. Not at all, for that matter. So they say sometimes there's a concept of Lom Chatiru Chayecha. But the Rebbe brings it in Perik Yudalid, actually. Brings it elsewhere as well, about Abraham Mitzvah Yaakov, Perik Memvov. In Lukuti Amor, also click away, you see Yudalid, that brings the Lom Chatir B'Chayecha, famous Gemara Seita Yudalid, that there was Abraham Mitzvah Yaakov, they saw their Gan Eden in their life. And to translate it, a person sometimes experiences it, very transcendent type of experience. Classically would be is gifted, if you will. Of course, it comes with a lot of toil. That's why it's called avodas hatfilah. It comes with toil and preparation. But when a person gets there, does whatever he can to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via that particular prayer, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu connects with this person's neshama. The whole idea of prayer is an emotional, when he emotes with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's a sensational experience. It's an intimate experience with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a person could have a little spark of that bechayecha of a lomcha, of this which is manifest in Gan Eden, to some bit, to the extent we mentioned a few times actually in the last while, of a famous saying of a chassid. This is one would ever have experienced a successful davening, they will never reach out and seek any other taiva, any other desire associated with the guf and nefesh bahamis, the body and the animal soul. Is truly a pleasurable, delightful experience. It truly is a delightful experience. That's a spark, a tiny spark, a very tiny spark. Which one would say, it's again based, how do we know it's that? Because, when one experiences that, they know it's something extraordinary. And it says that davening is a kind of ability to enter into, so to say, a preview of what Eilam Haba is all about, which is Neshamis Yeshvim V'Neni Miziv Ashchina. That is Neshamis sit and derive pleasure and delight. They bask in the pleasure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They derive pleasure, delight in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But nonetheless, in the overall, of course, we have no understanding what Gan Eden, Tachtin is all about. Gan Eden, Elin is a total different idea. That's why Neshamis are there, and they're sitting in Neni Miziv Ashchina. And they climb higher and higher. To what degree? Do they climb to the end? There is no end, even Memala Kalalmin. And again, we're saying this because based on whatever we're saying now is based on the explanation we gave and spent time on in the last class, in the class before. I believe this is the third or fourth class. Yet we explained then, Seivav Kalalmin is a total different idea. And there's no comparison at all. And this we even gave this example, that infinity, true infinity, is not excited at all that from one higher number than a lower, even a very high number, a quintillion. No, into infinity, a quintillion, a trillion, 1,000, 101 is exactly the same. Total different idea. This is Seivav Kalalmin in comparison to Mamala Kalalmin. And that will be manifest in Eilam Hazeh, at the time of the resurrection of the dead, and that's why all the neshamas will be rushing down to Eilam Hazeh and to invest in a body. Tchias HaMesim, what do they need it for? What does anybody need to come from the Gan Eden, to come into the physicality of Eilam Hazeh, back into a body? It doesn't make sense. It sounds ludicrous from a certain perspective. and point of view, yeah, it probably is. There has to be something totally distinct why a neshama like Reb Shimon Bar Yochai or Moshe Rabbeinu would want to come down into Elam Hazeh. Or all the neshamas of all the great tzaddikim, Tanaim, Navim, tzaddikim, and so on. And the answer is because there will be the revelation, the manifestation of Seiviv Kol Almin, the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way Hashem is for himself, by himself. Seiviv means it encompasses. It's not Memale Kol Almin, filling in, which is a limited, measured light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's the transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way Hashem is for himself, by himself, beyond have any connection to Elam. And that's going to be manifest in this very physical world. And therefore, of course, the neshamas want to come down and experience something totally different. Because it's not just a bit more and a greater measurement, because it's not about measurement. This is about the Hashem himself will be manifest in this very physical world. The Sev of Kalam will manifest in this very physical world. And again, dafk in this physical world, because that's where the Yid did his avodah on the overall, which this world, as Alter Rebbe explains in Perik Lamed Vav, it's worth to see Lamed Vav in Likutei Amarim, the first segment. It's a click away. That the higher worlds are Yerida Meir Panav Yisbarach. It's a decline, it's a degradation, it's a descent for HaKadosh Baruch Hu even to connect to a world like Atzilus. Alter Rebbe makes it very clear. Where is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's interest is Dafka Ne'elam Hazeh. Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu is leid lo yizbarach dina b'tachtim. So the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is essentially here. The Ikar Shechina was b'tachtim. Ikar Shechina would be Seviv Kalam. The only thing is that throughout the time of the toil, the avodah, particularly in the time of Galus, it wasn't so manifest. Or many times it wasn't even manifest at all. So there's a chayshich chasar, it's the darkness, opaqueness, covers the land. Here's Seviv Kalam. What does it mean? Yeah, it covers the land. It's hiding. Lukus could be hiding. Ochinato keil mistater. But it's just mistated. But the real, where is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Seviv Kalam, the Ikar Shechina will always remain b'tachtenim, and through in the tachtenim, via the avodah of the tachtenim. Avodah of the Yid, which is here, Alei Adam, is in this very physical world. And when Mashiach will come, it's not just like a jack out of the box. It comes just out of the surprise. No. As Alter Rebbe writes, Ma'aseinu v'avodaseinu, our work and our toil throughout the millennia after millennia, from the very beginning of creation, namely from Matan Torah, that we drew the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu down here in this very physical world. Mashiach will come. It'll just be revealed, the Gilui, this which is already embedded in the very fabric, if you will, of Elam Hazeh, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his interest. Nis Ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem's taiva, Hashem's desire, lust was dafka b'tachtenim in this very physical world. When Mashiach will come, it will all be manifest. So the core of HaKadosh will be manifest, and Shabbos are coming down into Elam Hazeh and invest in a body. Of course, make no mistake, it's not that same type of body which the world was accustomed to until the time of Yemei Mashiach, or namely Tchias HaMeisim. It says the body will be a different type, it will be crystal clear. It's like, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu coming down from Har Sinai, Koronei Panov, a certain glow, because the goof of Moshe Rabbeinu shone because he was transparent. The Gilul Lukus was transparent in his own guf hagashmi, in his physical body. That would be the default normal state of all the tzaddikim and all yidden in the end of the day. Tzaddikim, the body will be a different body, also type of body, but a guf it will be, because after in this world there is the purpose. This is where the purpose. This is where the Ikar Shechina exists. And that's why they will come bigufay seim in their bodies, and they will be mikuyim bizman atchiyah to be enemies. Again, at that level of the divine presence associated with Seviv Kol Almin down here in this very physical world. Now, Alter Rebbe adds additional to the overall avodah, namely the avodah of tzedakah, like we learned last week. Rechovo mitzvah bas chomai, not mitzvah secha. Again, saying this briefly because we had in the previous classes. It's not your mitzvahs, mitzvah secha, which of course every mitzvah draws the level of Seviv Kolal, that has it so many places. In the very beginning of Tanya, in the famous Prokim between Yud Ches to Chaf Hei, this is the Seviv Kolal. Hashem Himself exists within every mitzvah, particularly the Midat Torah. And later the Alter Rebbe in Perik Mem Hey Mem Vav begins to celebrate it, literally, to celebrate this whole experience of learning Torah, doing mitzvah, what it accomplishes, and what level we're connecting to. Mashiach will come, it'll be manifest, and again, by every mitzvah, but nothing like the mitzvah of tzedakah. That's why David HaMelech says, mitzvah singular, because where's the real rachvus associated with Seviv Kolal Min is dafka mitzvah tzedakah, like explained, Levushay tzedakah, Hashem's garment tzedakah, like explained in the previous class, because this is what the Eibishter constantly does. This is Hashem's mitzvah. Hashem is always giving tzedakah, as we explained again in the way the Alter Rebbe explains it over here, this unique explanation of the Alter Rebbe, which is picking up the previous classes. And again, TanyaOnline.com, the other advantage of the website, that you could follow the text and find the text, what you're looking for as an example of the different quotes we gave over here in this very chapter. And it's also easy to follow. The text is in a separate scroll, but let's go on. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekel u'barei. So he goes on and he says, "Lefi sha'or v'gilush beganei mechlis malak halalmin." This is what we're up to, which is ishtalshus madrega madrega l'tzimtzum atzum. The whole malak halalmin, the setup of malak halalmin, is the evolution, the order of evolution from one level to another level through enormous condensments, enormous holdbacks, if you will, which is classically the term tzimtzum. It's condensed, the air is condensed, which allows it to come into Eilamis. That's why it's called Memalik Kolalmin. So, of course, it takes great tzimtzum atzumim. You have to take a huge, a grand sizable object and put it into a small box. You have to condense it, seriously condense it to go into a small box. The fact that the lukus, which by definition is bli gvul, infinite, and come down into Eilamis, even the highest Eilamis, even Atzilus, which is called as well as an Eilam, as an example, of course you need great tzimtzumim. But again, we're not going to go into the whole subject of tzimtzumim, but just on the surface, Alter Rebbe says not stam tzimtzumim, but tzimtzumim atzumim, intense tzimtzumim, of course, because it has to come into Eilamis Memale Kolalmin, commensurate to the capacity of the Eilam, how much it could contain, how much it could take, how much it could connect with this Eir. So of course there's great tzimtzumim, an intense tzimtzumim. Our sages of blessed memory say, the whole Lamaba was created with a Yud. Really? Wow, that's a great tzimtzum. As Alter Rebbe has it many times in Likutei Torah. It's interesting, in Tanya, Alter Rebbe doesn't bring this in Likutei Torah, it brings this myriads of places. Someone comes in front of the Mediterranean, and then takes a little teaspoon as an example. We're going to use different words. A teaspoon of water, and he's going to say, "Look, I just made a dent. I just emptied a bit the Mediterranean. I took out a teaspoon of water. You emptied nothing." Well, categorically you did, because there's nothing really infinite in Elam Haza. Even though you come in front of the waters, you could appreciate somewhat in the terminology of infinity, one way or another, when you stand in front of an ocean as an example. But nonetheless, by definition, it's not infinite. But in reality, you can't say justifiably you emptied. You made a little dent. You made no dent, not really, because you'll take on much more and you still won't make a dent. The enormity of the waters, as an example, of an ocean, and even less than that. But let's talk about a Mediterranean. Alter Rebbe uses the lashon Ukiyonus as an example. Use different oceans, but the common denominator is that you cannot celebrate one way or another, or understand the nothingness, if you will, of a small teaspoon of water in comparison to the enormity of waters which exist in an ocean. So there's Alter Rebbe, the whole Ilam Haba, the whole Gan Eden, the entire Gan Eden Atachtin, Gan Eden Elyon, is biyud It's a tiny little water. Where's the whole Kiyonis? The whole, all the waters. How would it be translated in the parable? In other words, in this which the Alter Rebbe is namely his message in all these places he mentions this parable in Likutei Torah, this example in Likutei Torah is the whole Eibishter, the whole Ukiyanos, the whole ocean is in a Mishnah. The whole Eibishter is in a Mishnah, in Halacha. Appreciate when you sit and learn Torah. That Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu is climbing Mechayel Choyel, but it's all in that little small teaspoon, maybe even less. And when you sit and learn a Mishnah, you have the entire Eibishter. And is there any comparison? It's not like here you say you have a teaspoon and here you have a full cup of water, of Ilkus, of God, the godly reality. No, it's not a full cup of water. It's not even, you can't even compare. You have the entire ocean, the entire Eibishter in the message of this parable is in a Mishnah, in a Halacha. You learned Halacha in Rambam, you learned a piece of Gemara. Or in a mitzvah, as an example. By Torah, you have it much more, as Alter Rebbe famously explains in a few places in Tanya. Famous Likutei Amorim, 3 places in Likutei Amorim. So the whole entire Ukiyanos, the entire ocean, which means the whole Eibishter is in the halacha, in the Torah that you're learning, in the Mishnah that you're learning, in the mitzvah that you're doing. Which is, again, you see the spirit of that message to what he says over here, Tchias HaMeisim, Dafka in this world, because here there will be the revelation, manifestation of Sebev Kolamin, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the entire. And which this is synonymous with the message be Yud Nivar El Mabah, the whole El Mabah. Is created with a Yud. Okay, let's look at the Aleph Beis. Yud is a very tiny letter. Even though it says the smallness of the Yud is because it represents something much greater than any other, the Aleph Beis, granted. But at the end of the day, it's one letter, and the Alter Rebbe explains this famously. He begins this mashal many places in Chassidus. The Rebbe explains it many times. But even in Tanya, the first famously, the Alter Rebbe brings this example in the Perek Chof, the 20th chapter of Likutei Amorim, which is again a click away. He explains there that, take for example, even a human being, and again, I'm quoting also different quotes, though in the same spirit of this Perek Chof, but it's mentioned many times in Chassidus from the Alter Rebbe, by the Alter Rebbe himself. Take an average person, a human being. How many letters did you utter yesterday, today, as an example? Countless. It's not really countless. Of course, it's not countless. A person could live 1,000 years. You can't say he uttered countless letters. It's not countless because there's always a limitation when a person, to the amount of letters a person can utter, even he lived 1,000 years, as an example. But we could use the terminology justifiably. Countless letters. One day, to this one, that one, every sentence is a few letters. Every word is a few letters. Every sentence is multiple letters. And what about how many letters do you utter in 1 week? And in 1 month? And what about in a year? So take one letter, a small letter, in comparison to all the letters you uttered in the last year, as an example. The comparison is grand and great, and it kind of insignificant. That one letter in comparison to all the letters one would ever utter, or uttered in that very year, as an example we're giving. And when you say 2 years, that one letter becomes even less significant, more insignificant in comparison to the amount of letters. I utter the person, well, the one utters in 2 years, an example. Or a simple example, take one leaf. So of course, if you take one leaf, in comparison to that branch, the branch has 30 leaves, as an example. Okay, 1 out of 30. Can't say it's small in comparison. But could you compare that one leaf to the many branches, or the entire tree, which has multiple leaves? One leaf in comparison to all those leaves. Less significant. One leaf in comparison to the leaves of the entire field, the entire forest, as an example. It completely loses its significance by far. Because there's millions of leaves in that forest, as an example. Larger forest. Every tree has thousands of leaves. In comparison to all the trees in the entire world. And when you talk about this similarity, give this another example to this. One letter in comparison to all letters, one spoken one day, in 1 week, in 1 month, in a year. What's one letter? Totally insignificant. And if a person lives 1,000 years, one letter in comparison to all the words and letters that he or she uttered in 1,000 years, not even to dignify. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu also has this speech, Bidvar Hashem Shemayim Nasa. Of course, it's not the same speech. The way it exists by man, there's nothing compared the creator to creation, even though he's the creator of creation. But nonetheless, metaphorically, there is a concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's talking, speaking, Bidvar Hashem Shemayim Nasa. Basara Mamores Nivra Elam. Hashem created the world with 10 sayings. Hashem spoke creation into being. So there exists the idea of Mamores. Comes the pasuk and says, "Kibeko Hashem Tzuri Lamim." You see this world, very sophisticated world, even Elam Haza. Forget about the Elam Esalyanim. Elam Haza, very complex, sophisticated world. You know how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested in this world? One letter, letter Hey. What about Elam Haba? With the tzaddikim yesh, v'menenim zivashchina tzaddikim sit and derive pleasure from the ray of the divine. Ray of the divine presence. Oh, that's a ray chashav Eilam, because Baruch probably invested so much more of himself into Eilam Habo. Comes the Medrash and the Gemara and says, no. Kibeko Hashem Tzori Lamim. This world was created with a Hey, and the entire Eilam Habo was created with one letter, with a Yud. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not someone you could say, well, 1,000 years, 3,000 years. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Chai La'ad V'Kayim La'netzach. So how many words could Hashem speak and utter? Truly infinite. And the entire, and so that tells you how much less significance one letter has, because it's not a matter of a year, 2 years, 3 years. Hashem's mamoris are kind of bligvul. So what is one letter in comparison to all the letters? And that's where we could appreciate the Alter Rebbe's mashal, this parable, which Alter Rebbe gives in L'Kutei Torah myriads of times. The 1 teaspoon, stand in front of the ocean, 1 teaspoon in comparison to the entire ocean, kind of nothing. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested in the entire Elam Haba. Kibeko Hashem Tzorei Lamim. The worlds were created, worlds plural, were created with these 2 letters, Elam Hazeh with a Hey and Elam Haba solely with a Yud. And again, additional to what Alter Rebbe is saying over here, we can appreciate what it means taking a Gemara and sitting down and learning a Gemara. You're connecting with the entire Eibishter. The whole Eilam Haba in comparison to Eilam Hazeh, this physical world, the Torah which is given in this physical world, there's no comparison at all. Therefore, one has to utilize, as the Gemara says, that this Eilam Hazeh, Kibei Luladam, Yechatef Achel, Chatef Ishti, this world is like a, generically would be called a wedding, hilula, but it's a time, it's a celebration. Grab and eat and grab and drink, because here you have the entire Eibishter. Wherever a person would go after, even he's a great tzaddik, a very righteous person, and he's going to be brought in with great honor and dignity into the Gan Eden, and in Gan Eden Atachten, in Gan Eden Elyon, as explained a number of places, there's the Nahar Dinor in between, not to go into it now. And from Yelcho Mechayel Choyel, from level to level, it's all an investment in this what HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're all appreciating in this what HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested, one little Yud. And the entire Eibishter is down here in this very physical world. In the Torah we learn, in the mitzvahs we do, which tells us how much we have to utilize every moment of our life to connect more and more. Nishtavo begufo de malko, to be connected to the body, to the entire Eibishter's dafka in this world. of course, we glean immediately the message, and it's connected to the fact that the neshamas are going to come down into this world, because here you have the Seiva. You see, it's tantamount to the Seiva of Kolam, to the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The way Hashem is formed himself by himself, not the Memale where HaKadosh Baruch Hu condenses his great light to come into Eilamis. As you see, everything comes around over here in this very page with this very explanation. But without Rebbe saying here, he's pointing out the great tzimtzumim, atzumim, the way Hashem has to condense himself with intensity. And not one tzimtzum, many tzimtzumim. And atzumim, each one is more intense than the other, because you have the great Eibishter and has to come into Olam Haba, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested a yud, the whole Eibishter in one yud. Of course, it has to go through many tzimtzumim, have to be atzumim, intense contractions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the Chochmilah, which is the supreme Chochmah, which is called Eden Ha'elyin, the supreme Eden, right? Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, is explained in Chassidus and Kabbalah. The Gan is the Bina, not to go into it now. The Eden is the Chochmah, is the Garden of Eden. Eden is the supreme pleasure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Chochmah, Ilah, Hamishtalsheles, Mislabeshes, B'chol Eilamis, which evolves and invests in all the worlds. And each world commensurate, that's the point of Memale Kolam, commensurate how much the world can contain. How much can a world contain? Well, it depends again if it's a world of Asiya, a world of Elam Yitzira, or Ambriya, or Atzilus. Whoa, Atzilus is not Stam and Eilam. Atzilus is a world that houses the Ein Sof. But nonetheless, a world it is, a Eilam it is. The Gemara says in Erevin, a Eilam is Melashon Helam Behester. It covers up over and conceals the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The mere makeup, because in the face of infinity, how could a world, which by definition is finite, one way or another, even Atzilus, which is Eilam, you can't really say, use the terminology finite, truly, because it has a certain infinite component to it. But nonetheless, an Eilam it is, so how can an Eilam exist in the face of the infinite? The infinite. It really can't. And the only way it can is because these great tzimtzumim, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu condensed as Eiri Abilti Balbul, in order to allow itself to trickle in, and to establish a trickle of light, and to create the existence of Eilam Atzilus, and how much more greater tzimtzumim between Atzilus and Bria, and then Yitzira and Asir, Eilam Hazeh Gashmi, this very physical world, which the Eir of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so not revealed and so less manifest that one has to seek it and search it and reveal it and so on, even though, conversely, the whole Eibishter, the Seiv of Kalaman, as we just learned, is Dafka in Eilam Hazeh. In the Torah that Hashem gave us, Aneichi Hashem Elikecha, Eisi Atim Leichim. B'yichuli, Hashem says, you're not connecting to a ha'ara, a little trickle of light of me, which would be in Gan Eden, as an example, in the highest levels of Gan Eden. But b'yichuli, eisiatem leichim, you're taking the entire Eibishter, which this is synonymous with the Gemara says about Anechi Hashem Lekecha, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's first formal exposure to Am Yisrael, which was of course by the Aseres Adibris, Maimed Harsini. Hashem began with the Anoichi, beyond Hashem and beyond the Lekecha, which these are also levels one way or another. Even the Shem Amfeidosh, of course, is synonymous with Sefer Kolaman, but deeper yet is the Anoichi Hashem Lekecha. How much more so Lekim, which would be synonymous with Memale Kolaman, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, it's beyond that. I see Atem Leichim, you're taking me, the core essence of Hashem, as the Gemara says. Onechi is an acronym of non-nafshik savis yavis. My soul, I wrote into Torah and I gave it over to you, and you can take me through learning Torah, the entire me, and namely this which the Zez Zayah, the reason why Hashem began with Onechi, because Onechi is the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is lo yisra, means you can't put it into a word. It's not hinted even into a word, into a letter, not even a spike. Lo yisra is lo bishum eis, but lo bishum kaitz. It's the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. That's why Torah is the Matana. He gave us the entire Eibishter. Torah has a beautiful Lashon, Perek Mem Zayin, the 47th chapter of Likutei Amorim. A click away. What a beautiful word we say. It says, we say in Sim Shalom every day, Ki Ba'er Panecha Nasata Lonu, in Sim Shalom, which is towards the end of the Amidah, say 3 times a day. with the light of your face, your countenance, that you gave us a Torah of life and a love of kindness. The Rebbe says you can pause. The real message over here is the pause after Hashem Elokeinu. With the light of your countenance, what did you give us? You gave us Hashem Elokeinu. You gave us Hashem. You, Hashem, gave us your core through Teiras Chai Bavas Chesed. When we learn Torah and we act with kindness and we do Hashem's mitzvahs. So from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Gan Eden, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Olam Haba, you have Tzimtzumim Atzumim. This is the Chochmei Law beginning, which is the Chochmah is called the Reishis HaIshtalshelus. As we know, we spoke about many times. Every Olam has the 10 spheres. What is the first one of 10 spheres? Is the spheres of Chochmah. So that's the beginning where HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows himself to be manifest in this fashion and style of the Mali Kol Almin, which of course comes through great Tzimtzumim from the infinite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to condense himself into one Yud. Even by a human being, Dr. Rebbe famously has, we learned it in Perek Hey, in Geras HaKodesh, an intellectual person, he has to condense his intellect into a phrase, into a statement, into a clause, into a word. It takes a lot of effort to contract his deep thinking and try to put it into a word. How much more so you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So the Hashem to come into this level of Eden, till it comes to the level of Yud, of course takes Tzimtzum. But that's where the source of all the energy of all the elements come from. The Alter Rebbe writes, it evolves and invests in all the elements. Like it says, Kulam Chochma Sisa. That all, Kulam refers to all the elements are connected to that Chochma, to that Yud. Like it says, the Chochma gives life. Because he's talking about all the elements. The Chochma is the source of life. And what do you have in Gan Eden? The experience of Gan Eden is Gilui HaSoga L'chol Chadafum Shiri Dilei. Gan Eden. So this is the makeup of all elements. What is the gift and why is Gan Eden such a great reward? Because here it's not only the fact, connecting to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mahava, Mechayim, Mekayim, brings existence and life to all the elements, which we can appreciate via the Mamala Kalam phenomenon. But Gan Eden, a person's brought behind the curtain and has the ability to have a noah, to derive pleasure of this great light. That's what Gan Eden is all about. It's Gili HaSoga L'chol Chadafum Shuri Dilei, based on how much his service he invested in the service of HaKadosh and how much Torah he learned in this world. After 120, HaKadosh Baruch said, let me take you behind the curtain. You can appreciate this air, this light, not only knowing of the existence of these worlds, like you know the existence of this world. Of course, this is a product. The way it's set up, Malach Kol Almin, again, the Sev of Kol Almin is here because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided. But make no mistake, this is the bottom of the line. A true production of the condensement, the great Tzimtzumim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we know it exists. And on a higher level, of course, the Eir is much more manifest. But that's what makes it Gan Eden, that a person enters into, say, behind the curtain, but it's not only behind the curtain, it's a deeper measurement, so to say, of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's where the great deride, the pleasure and delight a person experiences, of course, commensurate to his service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu down here in this world. The Fum Shiuri Delay, Kineda, as it's known, that the pleasure of the Neshama is in Gan Eden, from their understanding and their perception of the secrets of Torah, based on the occupation of the Yid in this very first group, in this world, that is, Benigla, which means in the revealed part of Torah, that you learn to piece of Gemara. And you learn to piece of Gemara, of course, it's Gishmak, and you learn Gishmak again, Teisves, and a Gishmak Rishin, and an Achrein, and a Bekibeg. Of course, there's a lot of timing in Torah. Make no mistake. Timing in Torah doesn't begin only from the Pnimius of Torah. There's pleasure in learning Torah. As one said, that if you don't find the pleasure learning Torah, you never learn Torah. If you learn Torah, you see there's an enormous amount of pleasure learning Torah, because you can't compare to the esoteric, to what's behind the curtain in this very Torah you're learning. So you're learning about Shnai Mechs and Batalas, two people holding a talis. One says, Ani Mitzasiya, I found it. The other says, I found it. What does Torah have to say about it? Each one swears that they don't have less than having all these svaras and this subtlety of the svaras, these different explanations. Each one is another gishmak and another type of pleasure which you have in this very sugya, in this very concept, in this very idea that you're learning, understandably so, but in the end of the day, you're still talking about two people holding a talis. One, they're arguing. One is, of course, lying, if you will. And what does halacha say about it? So it becomes a gishmaka part of nigla, but unless you can't compare to the enormity of a lakus which exists in the esoteric, in the other side of that very same halacha. How do we know it exists? Because we just said Torah is the Eibishter, Torah is the Anechi Hashem Alikecha. So of course there's a lot of pleasure and there's a lot of delight which exists in that very physical, in that halacha which again you learned it on a physical plane down here in this world. With all the gishmak you had in that sugi, could you compare it to the seidus, to the secret, to the energy of Kodesh Baruch Hu's tainug which exists, einig which exists in that halacha? Of course not. And that is the pleasure which a person experiences in Elam Haba based on all the Torah that he learned in this very physical world. In other words, learning the Torah in a physical plane, based on the examples, the way we can appreciate it rather on a physical plane. So that's the tainug of the neshama. And he says, as it says in Zayir HaKadosh, in Parsha Shlach, and the Gemara, the Rabbi Bar Nachmani, the famous Gemara, in the story of Rabbi Bar Nachmani. It's a bit lengthier, maybe we'll leave it for another time. But the Gemara had about the Sar Koidim to the Nega. It's a whole sugya in Negoim. And it said that there was an argument, Yeshiva Shalmailo, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said Toher, Yeshiva Shalmailo said Tomei. And they said, let's ask Rabbi Bar Nachmani, which is still in Elam Hazeh. Again, perhaps we'll go through the whole sugya perhaps another week. Maybe in the next class, just to appreciate the nigla, the shmak and the nigla of this story. But in the end of the day, we'll stop over here. In the end of the day, this is all a trickle of light, even the whole entire Gan Eden, and again, the greatest Nevi'im, Tzadikim, Neshames, the highest levels of the Neshames, Tanoim, even the Alter Rebbe adds over here. This is all part of the Yud, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the entire Elam Haba with one Yud, that little teaspoon. Tchias HaMeisim, where there will be the total manifestation of the Sevev Kalalmi dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can't even say dimension, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. As an example, the entire Okeanos, the entire ocean, the whole Eibishter himself will be revealed in this very physical world. Could we have any doubt why the Tzadikim, Tanoim, Meiraim, Nevi'im, as he says here, are going to rush down to Elam Hazeh? There's no comparison. And if it takes to invest in a physical body, whatever it takes. We did mention again earlier that the physical body will be distinct then to be a keli, to be a container to receive this great air of Sevev Kalalmi. But in the end of the day, it's a limited, a body is a body. But the neshamas, of course, will want to rush down over here because it's like someone saying to somebody here, I want to give you, celebrate the $1,000 as an example. And then one day he puts down a bag of $1 billion or $1 trillion. People won't drop the $1,000 and run to the trillion. And the comparison over here, the difference rather, this example to what he says over here is also beyond much greater than even this example, because here you're talking about one yud, a small yud, in comparison not only to all the letters and words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the mamoris of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which are truly infinite, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, so of course his saying, his words, his utterings are also infinite. But you're talking about the deepest levels of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the entire Eibishter himself. As the terminology is Seviv Kalalmi, the way Hashem surpasses, the Hashem hovers, Hashem is transcendent of Almin, the way that Hashem is formed, so by himself That's what will be manifest in this very physical world in the time of Tchias HaMesim, the entire Eibishter. So of course, the neshamas are sitting for thousands of years, but in the end of the day, they're climbing in that one yud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's just say a few lines of Gilei HaOresh B'Tchias HaMesim will be Seva Kalam, which is there's no tzimtzum, there's no shir, there's no gvul, b'li gvul v'tachlis. Without a border, without any limitation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Down here, in this world. And it'll be manifest precisely within Shamakam. We will invest in a physical body. Again, Alter Rebbe Lashon in Kotitei and Terei many times, a guf tzach mitzucht will be, of course, a crystallized body, because it'll need to contain, or be a keli, at least somewhat of a container to this great light. But a guf it'll be.